Okay, let's move on to our third round table. We're going to speak about food policy and air quality. On the food policy front, a lot of progress has been made, but still over 800 million people continue to go hungry every day. And as the world population will grow to 10 billion people by 2050, one may ask if the planet will be able to feed everybody. And in parallel with that, 90% of the world population lives in places where air quality exceeds the World Health Organization guideline limits. And over 8 million people die every year as a result of exposure to outdoor and indoor air pollution. So what are the solutions? What actions should be taken to tackle these problems? Well, I'll ask these questions to Shenggen Fan, Marion Guillou, Mathieu Coutière, and Marcus Amann. Madame Guillaume, je vous en prie. Tiens, Madame Guillaume, installez-vous là si vous voulez bien. Voilà, très bien, là-bas. Merci beaucoup. Mr. Amann, bonjour. Monsieur Coutière, mettez-vous là. Voilà, on est bien comme ça. Voilà, c'est parfait. We'll take a look at this box in a moment, of course. But first, we'll start with you, Dr. Shenggen Fan. Thank you so much for being here with us today. You are the Director General of IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, which is an international research center founded to improve the understanding of national agricultural and food policies. And its research takes place in very many different countries in Central America, South America, Africa, and Asia. So, Dr. Fan, how will it be possible to feed more than 10 billion people by 2050?
Well, the answer really depends on what we have just discussed.
There you go.
Sorry, so let me just repeat. Well, firstly, congratulations for 225 years old. So, I mean, that's a quite old age, but I'm sure still very young, probably another 500, even 1,000 years for the university to continue. So to answer your question, really depends on what we do. One is technology, one is policy. So now, just to try to echo some of the urgency or some of the sort of emergency we have just discussed this morning. So Paul, you mentioned that right now we have 821 million people who suffer from hunger, not having enough to eat. But in fact, that hunger number was on the rise for the last 2 or 3 years. So it's not just a static number, it's on the rise. Could you imagine? And major reason was the climate change. The climate change, conflicts, all this together that have contributed to that increase. But in the meantime, there are 2 other forms of malnutrition, I call it malnutrition. The one is lack of micronutrients, so iron, zinc, vitamin A, and so on. I think my friend Marianne will tell you how damaging if you do not have enough micronutrients. So 2 billion people suffer from that. And there's another form of malnutrition, overweight, obesity. Actually, 2.1 billion people suffer from overweight, obese. By the way, I have to congratulate many of you here. You are really fit, not overweight, not obese. But this is not true in the world. In US, in Canada, in Australia, many of them are overweight, obesity. Even in some of the emerging economies, China, India, Brazil, Mexico, they are getting heavier, they are getting fat. And a more dangerous thing is their children. So one third of the children born in some of the urban cities, in Beijing, Shanghai, maybe New Delhi, already fat, overweight. So they are already lost in their starting line. So that's not acceptable. Now, talking about another issue we have also discussed here, sustainability. Don't forget, food and agriculture account for 29 or maybe even 1/3 of the total greenhouse gas emission. So food and agriculture are part of the problem. Well, obviously, if we turn it around, it could also be part of the solution, right? You turn that question around, the solution. So if we can work on food, agriculture, we could actually help to mitigate the climate change. And meantime, to help to reduce hunger and malnutrition. So if you allow me to come back, I will elaborate what sort of technologies, what sort of policy we can really use to solve the problem, to feed other world.
Certainly.
You wanted to?
Oh, yes,
okay.
please go ahead.
So technology, so this IFPRI is part of the global network Because CGIAR, Consortium Group for International Agriculture Research, Marion has served CGIAR many functions for many years. So many centers have introduced a lot of magic technologies. In the 60s, 70s, Green Revolution, it's a rice, wheat, maize. The yield tripled to feed more people. But today, the newer technologies must have so-called multiple wins. One win, yes, we must continue to produce more using less land. That's one win. Second win is nutrition. So how can we add nutrition into our crops, called biofortification? I don't know whether we have any breeders here. If you have the breeders, you don't just breed for high yielding. You could also breed for higher nutrition by adding micronutrients into crops. So that's one sort of a win. Another win is stress tolerance or climate resilience. So if there is a heat wave, if there is a drought, or if there's a flood, if there's a cold weather, let's say freeze or frost, that crop can still produce pretty good yield. Not 100%, maybe 90, 95%.
That's good.
That's right. So these sort of multiple wind technologies, including CR, where Marion served as chair, so they have actually quite interesting technology. Underground radar, you can detect how root crops grow underground. So you can maximize harvesting season, maximize or optimize the use of chemicals, fertilizers. Green seeker, so some of the device that can tell you whether that crop needs nitrogen. You can just use that technology to look at the leaves. Then you will see whether that plant needs more nitrogen. So you can optimize the use of that. So the technology definitely is one of the solutions. But equally important, maybe I should say maybe even more important, because international food policy has a policy there. Because without policy, without good policy, technology action will not be able to happen. You don't invest in technology, and even if you don't have good policy, the technology are not going to be used. Now, equally important is economic. I think this morning, I think we have the Nobel Prize.
Yes, we went through that, yes.
Laureate, right? Economics. I think the policy, to be frank, we really messed up our food policy. The major challenges we have today is because of policy failure. For example, subsidies. One thing, just to give you one example. Today, the whole world is spending probably $500 billion wow, in subsidizing rice production, wheat production, maize production, some of the staple crops. So by doing that, you actually lose economic efficiency, you waste money, and you actually overuse some of the inputs, fertilizers, chemicals, causing food safety issues, causing underground pollution, land degradation, and you emit more carbon into the air. So these sort of subsidies are not sustainable. They're not economically efficient. They do not produce healthy, nutritious foods, just rice and wheat and maize, at the cost of more nutritious foods, rice, wheat, and maize. So let's reform it, let's cut it down, let's use that money for something else, like the innovations you have discussed this morning.
Now you are part of an important commission, which is called the Eat Lancet Commission on Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems. It brought 37 experts from 16 different countries. And the goal, one of the goals of this commission was to design a global planetary health diet from sustainable food production. So what does this diet look like? One must understand that it's a diet that an average diet that everyone should be able to rely on, and which will be sustainable for the planet.
Right. So this
what does it look like?
Yes. Well, this morning we discussed how important we live in our house, air conditioner or heating system, or how we drive transportation, right? But there's one thing you miss, that is what you eat, your diet. So what you eat actually really matters, not only to your health, but also to our environment. Yes, we can improve our efficiency, energy efficiency, cut down carbon emission drastically. If we don't change the way we eat, I'm afraid, I think our temperature, our Earth temperature, will rise probably 1.5 or 2 degrees if we don't do anything with food and agriculture. This is my key message. So what you eat, your diet really matters to your health and to planet. So what would be a good diet looks like? Yes, right now, in many rich countries, we eat too much red meat, too much. You only need
Too much meat.
Red
Red meat. Yes, sure.
Okay.
Red meat.
Obviously, total meat too. So for red meat, like a pork, beef, and lamb, you only need to eat 100 grams per week.
100 grams per week.
Per week. You can calculate how much per day, right? How much you eat right now. You can cut down dramatically. So that's one. Chicken, 200 grams. Chicken or maybe duck together.
Per week. 200 grams of chicken, of poultry
per week.
per week.
That's right.
Okay.
Fish, another 200 grams.
200 grams
right.
per week.
That's right. So for red meat, you really need to cut down. Cut down by half or even by 2/3. For fruits and vegetables, you must double your consumption. You don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. I think French probably are doing better. As I said, I don't feel
bit.
Yes.
Not my kids, I'm afraid.
Well, I don't know. So just to let you know that this part of the world, every year per capita is consuming probably close to 100 kg of meat per year. You don't need that much, maybe 30. I don't know, it really depends on how you cook it, maybe 30. But for Africans, I wanted to mention that for African South Asian, they actually need to eat more meat. Right now, on average, maybe only 5 kg, even 10 kg, particularly for children and the rural girls. They are anemic, they are stunted. Part of the reason is because they do not have access to animal proteins. Animal proteins have micronutrients, have good source of protein so the children can grow taller, stronger, even the intelligence can improve. So I would argue for a differentiated approach. Western society, cut down the meat consumption. South Asia and Africa, they needed to probably double, even triple the meat consumption.
But Dr. Fan, when someone from a Western country has a problem, a health problem, such as diabetes, for instance, or heart problem, they know that they have to change the diet. And it's always so hard and so difficult to change a diet. You know how hard time the people are having trying to changing the diet. So do you think this is, I know, okay, science says that's what we should do. Will it be culturally, internally, consciously possible?
Yeah, one is the behavior. Okay, if you know something is bad, but you still do it, why is that? I think we learned quite a bit from anti-smoking movement, anti-smoking. 30 years ago, you will see probably 50% of European men smoke. Now in China, probably still 50% of men smoke. The women also smoke. But today, that picture has changed. So the percentage of smokers have really come down dramatically. Why is that? I think behavior has been changed. Promotion, government policy, anti-advertisement. I think we can do better. Now the Coca-Cola, or I shouldn't mention Coca-Cola, but definitely some of these so-called sugary drinks, we can do better. We can ban it. Now in my institute, in Washington, if you visit my institute, there's no sugary drink. There's no fat meat. There's no beef. There's no mutton. Maybe fruits, vegetables, yogurt, nuts, and other things like this. So behavior can be changed, number one. Probably more important is economic incentives. I think this morning we heard from economics Nobel Prize laureate mentioning about taxing, pricing. I very much agree. Could you imagine if our food prices in this part of the world double or triple? Because why I need to double or triple? Because this is so-called externalities, the impact on the environment, impact on health, have not been reflected in pricing. How can we do that? If some food is not sustainable, unhealthy, why don't we tax them? Why don't we carbon tax? So at IPRI, we have a model to simulate the impact. You know, if we, let's say, impose carbon tax, that's $20 per ton. You can assign different money on that. Then we connect the money from taxing, and they use that money to promote more healthy, nutritious, sustainable food production to support them, not to subsidize them, through research, through value chain development, and so on. Do you know what happens? Yes, our planet will become healthier, and every year, more than 100,000 lives will be saved because of this. So win-win. So taxing unhealthy, unsustainable food and use that money to promote healthy, nutritious food will save, that number probably is underestimated. I could easily say like millions of lives in the future. So my answer to your question is definitely it's a yes, but we must all do together.
Okay. Marion Guillou, you are the president of Agrinium, which is the French Agricultural Veterinary and Forestry Institute. It supports the public training, research, and innovation policies in life sciences, animal health, health risks, forestry, etc. And you are personally specialized in food policy. So maybe the same question, what, in your opinion, will we be able to feed 10 to 12 billion people in 2050?
Okay, I will try to have a different point of view from the one Schengen just gave. My answer would be first the consumer and citizen attitude. That is to say, all in food is driven by the demand. And so instead of saying technology and policy first, or then economics and the prices, I would say the attitudes is very important. Well, I just give you a few funny examples. Do you know that whether your plate is big or small, you don't have the same impression eating the same quantity of food? So if the plate is small, you eat less, and satiety the signal will be before. So another example, if you look at TV or you don't care about what you are eating, you eat more because you don't have the signal in your brain again. So let's take into account that food intake, diets, eating is not only a physical phenomenon, but is at the same time
a psychological one.
Yes, psychological, behavior, cultural, the way you live with other people and so on. And so I would say, the attitude of the consumer will be a driver. And I give you a French example because for Schengen, I think it will be a surprise. In France, you have 10 million people using Yuka. Yuka, I don't advertise for Yuka today, but
you can.
Yuka.
No, I know, but you can advertise for Yuka because it's a good app. I like it.
You never have to quote, just one brand, but it's just a small application. And people, when they want to choose in supermarket, they just scan, and then they see whether it's
the
good
barcode,
for...
they scan the barcode.
Yes, they scan the barcode, and they see whether it's supposed to be good for them or not. And it will have a major influence on the food system in France. So I don't know whether it will be the same attitude in other countries, but things are changing quite quickly. And the young generation, more maybe than our generation, but altogether people will change. And so that will be my first, let's say the priority won't be exactly the same as Schengen's one, but the answer will be the same. And so we have done some research about how to feed the world in 2050. It's just to give an idea about, let's say 10 billion people. And so how do we manage to increase the well-being of the people, not the quantity of food, but the well-being. And so, by looking at different parameters, we saw that with 3,000 calories for all the people in all regions of the world, with 500 coming from animal proteins, animal products.
3,000 calories per day.
Per day, it's enough because you need 2,200 calories a day on average. So, and at the moment we eat in our countries 4,000, in the US 4,800. So you see, the people eat something that is not necessary in some countries, and as Schengen said, in Southeast Asia, in some countries in Africa, of course, the quantity is far lower. And so if you have a diet of 3,000 per day, per person, if you have less waste and less spoilage, if you have trade between the countries, maybe it's important to remember about that because with climate accident, even in Australia, even in all the places of the world, you can have climate accident. North Africa, for instance, will never produce enough for feeding the population and things like that. So you need trade to be sure that you will be able to feed the people in a sustainable way. But then it is possible. If you have less waste, good diets, not the same diets, because it's cultural. You know, it's fish in Japan, it's chicken and pork in
we
China.
don't all need to have exactly the same diet over the world, of course.
We won't, because
we'll take
culture
into account the cultural
But 3,000
determination.
kilocalories, 500 from animal products, you can feed all the world with that. So yes, it is possible, but you need to change a lot of things.
You can feed the whole world, but can you feed the whole world with having the same size of agricultural
well,
the
the area,
soils?
you mean the land?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the first parameter is diet. Second parameter, decrease waste and spoilage. Third, then what is very important, of course, you need the quantity, but you need the access. And as Armatya said, you know, the economics are sometimes quite wise. He said when there are people dying because of hunger, it's not because there is not enough food, it's because they don't have enough food. So it's a question of access, physical access, conflicts, wars are number one. Then price, of course. You know, if you cannot purchase the food, well, you have problems. So access is essential, of course, for succeeding in feeding other people and in the right way. So I would say it's a lot of change. It's possible to change, but it needs a lot of signal. And maybe I will add to what Schengen just said. You know, the price is important, but in big cities, and it was Mrs. Obama that made that remark, people cannot go to a shop. They no more have a vegetable selling shop. They have, you know, McDonald's, they have, fast food in the neighborhood, but they don't have a shop where they could buy some fruit and vegetables. So you need, even in very developed countries, you need access to the shops where you can find what you need for a balanced diet.
So if we think of the food system as a whole, what changes would you make?
So yes, we need to think the food system as a whole, because urbanization, as I said, is important, because infrastructures are important. If, farmers want to sell their products, you know, keeping the silos are important. All the chain is important. So yes, you need to think about the food system. And as I told you, the way the people will eat, the quantities they will eat, it's a major factor to know whether it will be possible to feed the world in a sustainable way. So what should we change? It's for sure education, for sure infrastructures. Well, of course, then we have to think about what Schengen said about the price formation, because the subsidies are not always the right subsidies, to be sure that you optimize the way the chain is organized. And then to be sure that you treat in a special way the weak population. At the moment we have weak populations for that in the world, and we have to target them first, of course.
So we've been speaking about food policy. I'd like to switch to air quality now with Dr. Aman and Mathieu Coutier. First, Dr. Marcus Aman, you are the Program Director of the Air Quality and Greenhouse Gases Program and a co-leader of ESA's Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And ESA conducts policy-oriented research into problems of a global nature and is located in Austria. And you also serve as the head of the Center for Integrated Assessment Modeling under the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution, the so-called CLRTAP. So tell me, do you have the feeling that the air pollution issue is now more important than in the past? I thought that in the 70s, for instance, we really had an air quality problem. Is it worse now? Or is it just different?
Well, first, thank you for the invitation. And that's a very good question. It is really important where we are looking. When we think about Europe, then indeed we had a very poor air quality in the 70s. But we have to say that there was public concern. And because of public concern, we had the political will and the policy implemented important measures, mainly technological measures, filters, catalytic converters, and as a consequence of this, the emissions really went down in Europe, and air quality is much better. But at the same time, we have to say that we are still, especially in the European cities, air quality is maybe, air pollution is twice as high as the safe level, which is defined by the World Health Organization. So for Europe, in principle, we have a very positive trend.
It's not enough.
It's not enough, but the situation is very different in the developing world. And there we have this very rapid economic growth now over the last years. We have no or very weak policies, and as a consequence of this, emissions are growing and the air quality is deteriorating dramatically. And this is known, and air quality, these episodes always make headline news, I think, around the world. Sure. And there's a big concern about the poor air quality. If you convert this into quantitative impacts, what does this mean for human health? The studies really suggest huge numbers. So we're talking about millions, 7, 8, 6, 7, 8 million people. Can discuss the numbers. But what is very clear, if you compare it to other risk factors for human health, then air pollution is currently globally, at the global scale, the largest environmental risk factor. So from the environmental side, air pollution is the most strongest impediment to human health. On the other hand, we also see that in Europe, in those countries where measures have been done, and also where measures have been done and the remaining measures, those are one of the most effective, cost-effective measures for improving public health. It's much cheaper to clean up the air and prevent many diseases instead of curing diseases afterwards to very, very expensive medical treatments. So even in the situation here where we have reduced pollution and the investments, money is much better invested into further measures into clean air than, for example, to refine the health system on cancer treatment.
Do you have the feeling that it's easier to have leaders get involved on a subject such as air pollution, for instance, than on a long-term global issue such as climate change?
Well, of course, all of us are humans, and for us, for most of us, here and now is more important than something the long and uncertain and distant future in some place in the world. And air pollution, unfortunately, in a way, goes very close to our hearts, literally. For example, when we talk about fine particles, which are the most harmful particles, when we are inhaling them, they're going into our lungs, from the lungs in the blood vessels, and then actually they're really damaging the heart. And there are a lot of serious heart diseases, heart attacks are a consequence of this. Even going into the brain, now these particles are found in the brain. Yeah? And these things, of course, are much more felt as much more important. I'm not saying they are more important, because also the long-term climate impacts are very serious. But subjectively, people perceive this as much more important and urgent than some abstract issues which are not immediately felt.
Now, air pollution is naturally seen as a challenge, but you personally have the feeling that it also can be seen as an opportunity. How's that?
Absolutely, and I think the argument starts from the point that people really care about air pollution, they're concerned, and we see in many parts of the world, also now in Asia starting, that people are demanding and accepting policy action. Now, on the other hand, the sources of air pollution are the same, to a large extent the same, as the sources of other long-term problems. For example, climate, when the energy sources emit air pollutants and climate greenhouse gases at the same time. Agriculture is another example where we have different types of pollution. And when we have a more systematic perspective on what can be done in terms of to clean up the air, then either we can follow the European approach, the traditional approach in improving technology, or we promote those measures which deliver near-term benefits on human health, but at the same time also deliver the benefits on climate or development, for which are much less popular, because their benefits, if you just look at the long-term issues, are much less popular.
what do you mean when you say, well, you told me that we can use air quality as an instrument to put the world on a more sustainable development path, because there's a link between air quality, energy systems, climate change, etc.?
Yeah. Well, when we look at this, I would characterize it like this, that the impacts, or the consequences of continued economic growth and also the additional pressure on air pollution from this increased economic growth can be, in Europe, has been successfully compensated by technologies. And I think a similar situation also holds for Asia, where technological solutions somehow can prevent further increases. The economy can grow, but the air pollution wouldn't get worse. But at the same time, the air pollution in Europe and in other places of the world is far from safe levels. And when we think how countries can get to the safe levels, then all these measures which we're discussing in the morning, like the structural changes, energy efficiency measures, clean energy, renewable energy, waste management, clean agricultural practices, recycling economy, these are really the only way forward. And now you shouldn't fall asleep after lunch. It was an excellent lunch, because you have heard this many times in the morning. But now I'm arguing that these measures are the only way forward to come to to achieve the safe levels of air quality, where you have these immediate benefits. So if we are serious about these safe levels or the good air quality, we must take these measures, independent of some global and long-term benefits. So this is the only way forward. And I think this is a very strong rationale to get also acceptance for those type of measures, which, by the way, have a lot of other development benefits, in the interest of clean air, where people have rather immediate benefits for themselves.
And you told me you were very optimistic about the possibility to solve the pollution, the air pollution problem. How's that? What do you think that it can be solved when it's been a decadal problem? We had this for decades now.
Well, on the one hand, I think from the scientific side and from experience in many countries in the world, we know what these solutions are.
What does it take, for instance?
On the one hand, the technological solutions, but then also especially all these structural changes with all these co-benefits. Now, we also know that to implement the solutions, we need the political will, which is lacking for some long-term issues, but for air pollution in many countries of the world, people demand this type of changes, the clean air, and the political will, if with high public demand, the political will is there. And this can open then also a much better future and also realistic perspectives for implementing these measures, where we have global benefits, not because they're not only serving local air quality, but they also have an positive impact on global climate and many other development issues.
Now we'll move on to Mathieu Coutière. You are the CEO of a company, a startup, which is called Air Serenity. It's a startup which is dedicated to treating indoor air. So do you have the feeling that indoor air is actually a problem that we need to tackle?
It's not a feeling, it's a reality measured by everyone. So yes, I do have the feeling. Yeah, it's more than that. I mean, it's a real issue. It has been measured in houses that the air pollution is 5 to 10 times worse than outside. Why? Because the air from outside goes in, so you have the same level, and in the house you add pollution with the day life. So the best thing to do is to breathe the outside air and make it as clean as possible outside, but then you have to avoid emitting pollution inside. So it's not only a feeling, it's a reality.
You told me that 50% of the population would have allergies in 30 years' time, and okay, so...
Another statistic is really interesting. When I was young, which is not that far ago, in the 70s, 1 child out of 10 had asthma problems or allergy problems, breathing allergies, 1 out of 10. Now it's 1 out of 3. And it's not only a statistics. When I say this to friends, they all tell me, well, one of my child has problem and so on. Though in reality, 1 child out of 3 has problems. It has been proven by WHO that this is linked with air quality. It's been proven. So, and the trend is such that if you continue on this trend, yes, in 20 years' time, 1 out of 2 of the children will have problems, allergy problems.
So you came with a guest was just next to you there.
Yes.
It's in French, it's Livy. You call it
It's called Livy, yes.
Livy. Yes, exactly. Livy. So air purifiers are already commercialized. So what makes you think that yours is better?
It has been measured again. In fact, there are two major kind of pollutions. Well, the third one will be viruses, which is kind of pollution, but viruses is not deadful or not often. The first pollution that we hear about is particulate matter, the one due to automobile heating and so on. This is trapped by a filter which physically blocks the particles. We do the same as everyone in this domain. But the indoor pollution is not that. This is the outdoor pollution. The indoor pollution is due to chemicals. Chemical products that have been used for years and years and years in all the industrial products. When you use cleaning products, when you use glue, when you use paint, when you use furniture, typically IKEA or this kind of furniture, there is glue inside. All of that dries. And when it dries, it releases molecules. These tiny molecules have been used for years before we understood it was unhealthy. It creates cancers, it creates asthma, as I mentioned. It creates a lot of problems on heart, on whatever. A lot of different, there are so many molecules, in fact, that there are a lot of potential disease after that. So we discovered recently, or WHO discovered recently, 10 years ago, that it was harmful. And the industry has not adapted, and nobody has really found a way to capture these pollutions. We have found one, which is different from the previous ones. The most well-known of these molecules is called formaldehyde. The global family is called VOCs, volatile organic compounds. The most well-known, which is the smallest, is called formaldehyde. In all air conditioning systems, you have a filter, let's put it this way, called activated carbon, which does not block formaldehyde. It blocks some molecules temporarily, but not formaldehyde. So we have looked at the different ways to capture many VOCs, among which formaldehyde, and how to avoid that they are released back in the air after time.
So
this is inside.
At the heart of this air purifier is a ceramics, which is incredible. You told me that each gram has an enormous surface of 800 meters square.
Exactly,
Each gram
yes,
has
yeah.
a surface of 800 meters square, so you can irrigate the absorbent with plasma. And afterwards you have to clean this ceramics, which
Exactly, I'll tell you how it works.
takes the pollutant. Okay, and then you will be able to clean this ceramics with a plasma. But other systems such as yours also have plasmas to clean the...
Nearly nobody has plasma. In fact, when you want to block molecules, all of you have one system to block molecules, which is the lung, because your lung captures molecules. And the lung does work because it has a huge surface in a small volume. What we've done is basically that. We have ceramics, as you said, which have 800 square meters of surface per gram. So in a tiny environment, you have a lot of surface, and the molecules get stuck onto that. If we do only that, after a couple of days or weeks, the molecules will be released, like the carbon I mentioned earlier. So we clean that with plasma, which will oxidize these molecules. Plasma is ionized air, quite complex to create, in fact, because we have to do sparks from 0 to 12,000 volts in microseconds. If you do sharp voltage, you have clean plasma without ozone. So if you go 0, 12,000, 0, it's okay. If you do 0, 12,000, 0, like that, then you create ozone, which is deadly.
Oh.
So there is a risk. This one is not deadly.
This one
is
not
not deadly.
Okay, but other air purifiers need to use plasmas, and when you use plasmas, you create ozone, which is
there is a risk.
Which is a pollutant.
And this one, in fact, was created in the laboratory of plasma here in the Polytechnique. So the lab is one of the most well-known labs of plasma in the world, so the quality is pretty good. There is a good knowledge about plasma here. That's why we are confident. But if people do plasma without being specialized in that, they create ozone. So there are two companies in the world doing plasma. We are the one, and the other one.
Only two.
The other one is in the
I thought
US.
there were more of them. Okay.
Yeah.
So Livy is really a fantastic product. When we
hope so.
Listen to you. So you're just about to selling it.
Yes, we're about to selling it. So
How much?
The price?
Yes, please.
800 euros.
Okay.
It's expensive. It's more expensive than competition, but it's so much efficient. So quality has a price. Quality has a price, and your life is more, is more safe and has more worth than that. So.
Okay.
800 euro. And inside that, in fact, you have a cartridge that we clean every day with a plasma. And after 1 year, we are not magicians or not yet magicians. After 1 year, you have to change the cartridge. We recycle it, and the new cartridge costs 80 euros. So not too expensive this time.
So if you have any questions to our panel, please feel free to ask them on the application, on the Connects Me application. I'm sure everybody will be happy to answer them. Mr. Fan, and maybe Madame Guillou as well, of course. Let's listen to this one. Dietary habits are extremely cultural and local. The Eat Lancet Planetary Diet you told us about poorly considers local acceptability of the changes in diet. That's their opinion. Are there models of sustainable diets that take more into account the local habits and cultural acceptability of changes?
No, absolutely.
There you go.
There you go.
Yes.
Am I on? Yeah, okay. Yes, absolutely. So there is no single so-called best diet. The diet has to be localized, has to use local materials, or they can either buy from the market or produce from themselves. So, but the general principle is a good one. So certain parts of calorie come from meat, most parts of the calorie from fruits, vegetables, some from beans, some from staple crops. So there is a sort of a chart to show you what would be the best diet from your local food. But in general, so you needed to eat more fruits, vegetables. You needed to eat more beans. You needed to eat probably more fish. I mean, this is general principles. If you allow me, actually, I wanted to make a strong link between agriculture, food production, and air pollution, both indoor and outdoor. Outdoor, in India, let's say New Delhi. New Delhi now has become one of the polluted cities. Beijing is not anymore. So, part of the reason actually is agriculture. So they burn the straws in neighboring states, Punjab, Haryana, and then all this dirty air come to New Delhi. Agriculture is part of the problem. Now, indoor pollution, in many African countries, they use charcoal to cook their food. Indoor pollution, not just from stir frying, but also from the burning the charcoal. That every year could be 1 million people die from that. So what I mean is here, agriculture food can link to a lot of issues you have just discussed, including nitrogen use, including methane emissions. All this come from food and agriculture. So my key message to everybody here is, when you talk about climate change, do not forget about agriculture. Even you do everything beautifully, but without tackling agriculture, we will already have 2-degree world, or at least 1.5 by 2050, or maybe a little bit later on that.
Marion Guillou.
Yes, so I perfectly agree with what Schengen said about the fact that it should be different products, but the same quantity globally and so on. But I would insist on some new facts. For instance, now it's fashionable in France and in Europe to eat raw meat, raw fish. Yes, and to eat some vegetables that you keep a long time. And so you have new safety problems. You have new safety problems in the new diets that we should be careful about. For instance, there had been 30 people dying in Germany because of some small germs of, maybe you remember that, it was maybe 3 years ago or something. In Germany, it was just germs coming from Egypt. And yes.
Salad, yeah.
E. coli, yes, E. coli.
Oh, yes.
E. coli.
Escherichia coli.
Escherichia coli, yes. And of course, at the time, previously you did not eat such products. And such products coming from organic farming in Egypt, you didn't do that. So that's a new health problem coming from new eating habits. So we have to adapt the sanitary, the safety system to those new type of consumptions as well. So you have to take into account local diets, but you have to take into account, the evolution of the diets as well for the safety and the sustainability of the diets.
We have a question for Mr. Coutier. What is the maximum surface of the apartment or house that Live-I can treat?
This treats, this Levy treats 50 square meter, which is one big room or 2 rooms basically most of the time, except if you have a castle, but it's not often the case. So you put it between 2 rooms. The best place to put it is in a room because you spend time in the room, but you don't spend time in the kitchen. You don't spend time in the living room either. You spend time in the bedroom. So with this, you can put it. You open the door between 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. You put it there, and it cleans all 3 bedrooms in a couple of hours, half an hour, sometime between half an hour and 1 hour. So 50 square meter is the exact number you wanted to hear.
Okay, I have another question for you or for Mr. Aman about indoor pollution. Are regulations on products which pollute, like cleaning products, a solution? Should we ban unhealthy cleaning products?
It's a complex question. You have so many. I mean, we should not ban anything. We should advise to use products which have biological molecules, basically. But there are so many molecules, and the length between the distance between the moment when you launch a molecule and the moment when you see the result is 10 years or 20 years. So it's very difficult to ban a molecule or to ban a product because finding the proof that it's unhealthy is so complex.
How heavy is it?
It's 7 kilograms.
7 kilograms, okay. And it fits in an apartment.
Well,
Okay, good.
you can buy many if you want.
Sorry?
You can buy a lot of if you want.
Oh yes, I guess. I'd be happy to test one. Okay, so it seems that it's really possible to feed the world population even by 2015, when we will be 10 to 12 billion people on the planet, provided we do what's required. At least it's technically possible, but we also have to strongly change our diet, and that's not going to be an easy part, I'm afraid. Yes, we also have to tackle this air pollution issue, especially if we think that it can certainly put the world on a more sustainable path. And about Levy, well, you can give it a try. Yeah? You are there. You'll be on a demonstration.
You can come to see the demonstration, and it won't be very efficient because it's so spacey there.
Okay.
It's white space.
So it's on display. So
you can see what it's like.
Are you on the right?
We have a booth when you go out here. We are on the right. Yes.
Okay, on the right side. So if you want to take a look, thank you very much to Marion Guillou, Schengen fan, Mr. Aman, and Mr. Coutier. Thanks very much. OK, let's take a break. On va s'arrêter pour une demi-heure. Je vous propose de nous retrouver à 4 heures pour clore cette grande journée avec une table ronde d'environ une demi-heure sur un sujet tout à fait passionnant, les plateformes de données. Oui, les plateformes de données qui sont en train d'être installées, en train d'être mises sur pied. L'État est en train de mettre des dizaines de millions d'euros pour en créer une sur le sujet des données de santé. Eh bien, on pourrait faire la même chose pour le développement durable. On va en parler tout à l'heure, avant les conclusions de la journée. Merci beaucoup. On se retrouve dans une demi-heure, donc à 4 heures. À tout de suite.